Surf's up, guys, it's Mauisnake here, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about what Leetify has cooking up, and I must legally say this, I am getting paid to talk about it. And what that is Ledify's competitor to the HLTV 2.0 rating. They're coming up with one of their own ratings, and it's meant to maybe be the new standard in terms of evaluating players on a one-number judgment score in order to find out who were the real contributors in a match and who are the bottom feeders. So what Leetify did is they sent me a couple resources to talk about this new rating that they're putting out there that they think can beat HLTV rating, because they think there's a couple factors that HLTV rating doesn't really take into account, and Leetify rating is taking into account. And I will say straight up that one thing that it does is it incorporates the economy of a team. So eco frags are worth less, guys. That's finally something that we've needed in a rating for a long time, and Leetify are trying to do it now by putting this together. So I'll give you guys kind of a little bit of a rundown of some of the main points about the rating. The average rating is a 50. So, don't think you're bad for getting what you might think is a D. Like a 60 to a 69 is a good rating, according to this. The average rating for all players in a match is going to be a 50. The rating is structured in such a way that it's a little bit more duel focused, and it uses a win probability model throughout the round. So what this means is the duel focus part means that every engagement is set up in kind of the perspective that it is a duel. So what that means is if the entry fragger in a round finds an opening kill, they get the 5v4, but they are traded back and it's a 4-on-4, that whole situation is processed, if it happened very quickly, as a single round kind of just event. So that means that a player that finds the opening kill will still find value in that with how they distribute the rating, but the person who died and was traded will get points too. And the 4-on-4 situation means that the person that immediately trades will get a very similar rating to the person who found the entry frag. Because let's be honest here, HLTV rating does overrate the entry killer a lot of the time, and sometimes they're just going to die immediately after, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because on the CT side, for example, if you get the entry kill and you die, you leave it to a 4v4, and that's generally speaking bad for your team. So Ledify wants to try to alleviate just mindless pushing from, just providing like what HLTV calls impact, and actually process that whole event as one big circumstance, and then kind of factor it out after there's an output to it. So what they also mean by using a win probability model is that a win probability model constantly weighs the likelihood of a team and how they are supposed to, should they be winning the round or should they be losing the round. And this kind of reminds me of something where when I was actually first coaching Space Station with Davey and Grim, a few other players on there, but I mean, those are the ones that stuck around. What I said in pretty early on was I was like, you guys are really pretty good at getting in 5v4s, but you're not necessarily good at winning them. But if you get yourself into a 4v3, you're going to win that a lot more. And I remember having the conversation with Davey briefly that it's kind of like, why do you think that is? And it's really in simple math, it's just that a 4 to a 3 is a better kind of percentage. It's a better ratio. A 4/3, if you did the fraction, is a better fraction than a 5/4. It's a more favorable ratio. So if you're in a 5-on-4, if you're in the 4 and you get a return kill, that's something that's possible. Like that's a very doable kill. But doing it, let's say in a 4-on-1 and you're the one, let's say you get 3 kills, you bring it to a 1-on-1, because you had such a low likelihood of bringing back, kill number 1, kill number 2, kill number 3, those are very high value. And even though you didn't win the round, you would get a lot of kind of rating points for that, what you did right there. So other factors of it is that it sorts duels and it scores those duels, those events I was talking about, with multiple contributors, because not only is the killer rewarded for it, but the person who deals a lot of damage is rewarded to it. And that's something I'm going to talk a little bit more about later as a concern for their rating, because it's something that they mentioned. And the person that throws a flash is also contributed. They get about, I think, 10% roughly. I think it's like 9 point something percent of the duel's output is credited to them. So that's something that right now with HLTV stats, there is a component for getting rating based off of assists, but to the best of my knowledge, it's not actually related to flash assists. And that's something where I straight up could be wrong about, but in the kind of digging I did for this video, I couldn't really find if anybody said anything. And that's why it really is frustrating that HLTV rating has kind of always had this stranglehold over how ratings work. I did use the reverse engineering the HLTV 2.0 article that someone put out, but they didn't even really talk about assists. Like I think they're separating assists as in doing 40 or more damage as opposed to getting a flash assist. But either way, that's something where they are strictly crediting a flasher for not someone that reveals themselves, you know, like sending nudes, but they're going to be crediting somebody that is throwing a flashbang. So things I like about the rating is that I think that players that bring rounds back to win them deserve the most credit in the game. I think that players that win 1v3s are the most valuable players. I think that's just flat out. Like it's very tough to rate, you know, someone like Xyp9x's impact because HLTV rating doesn't necessarily credit him in those major, you know, quarterfinals, semifinals where he wins amazing clutches over and over again. Like if he wins 3 clutches in a game, that's obviously more valuable than Magisk running out on an entry route, getting 2 kills on an anti-eco, for example. Not that Magisk is bad or anything like that, obviously. Everybody from Astralis 2018 was god tier, but other things about it is, I think the biggest thing is economy. So Ledify provided an example that showed how there was a round that FaZe were playing actually against Mausports, and Mausports were on 5 Glocks. And so the percentage chance for FaZe to win the round was 91% at the beginning of the round. You're going to win with a gun round versus Glocks 91% of the time, according to their model. You know, I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but that's how they're putting it. And so they basically gave out points to Brokey, who got an anti-eco ace by giving him, for the first kill, 6 points, because after he got the first kill, their chances of winning went from 91% to 97%. So he got 6 points in the rating for the round. And then he got another kill. So their rating went from 97%, their chance of winning, to 99%. So he got 2%. And because he killed everyone else, the remainder 1%, those kills didn't count for a lot. Those weren't like the ADR that he got, that extra 300, you know, damage he outputted really only counted for 1 point according to the Leetify rating scale. So you can see or hear that basically a person that farms an eco round, especially hunting down the last couple of kills, which are pure, like almost pure meaningless, that person is not going to be heavily rewarded, and they never should have been. But that's something where HLTV rating doesn't make that distinction. So I think this is by far the best part of Ledify rating. And if you literally just took the Ledify rating, stripped it of everything else about these kind of duels, or just kind of the way they're measuring these round win percentages, just focus on the economy, this is already a better rating than HLTV in that sense. So I will strongly commend them for what they did in regards to this, the factoring in the economy and the round win percentages. You know, that's huge. So the next thing is that I actually do think that trade situations expresses a single output as opposed to entry fragger getting a lot of points, the second trade frag not getting as many points, and then the person who kind of dies and was traded getting very low points. I think that's something that's always been a little bit of a flaw of HLTV's ratings, where you would see players like Art get really high ratings because they just throw their lives into the fray all the time. And the thing is, they're not actually punished that heavily too, because if you look at how opening rating is calculated on HLTV, you still get a very good rating if you have a negative, like a sub 50% success rate. So that's something that I always felt like was a little bit odd how much they really do credit them, because I think that, if they succeed a lot but are traded a lot, that shouldn't really give them a ton of points. Like a 4v4 doesn't necessarily mean you should have like a 1.12 rating for the round or whatever it is. So I like that they take the whole kind of engagement into account. They call it like a duel. The whole duel is like one event. And I also like that they just flat out give credit to Flash Assisters, because HLTV does have a stat. It shows in parentheses next to their assist column how many Flash assists somebody gave. But I truly don't know the contribution to that person's stats. And maybe it does give them a significant contribution to somebody's stats, but because HLTV is so opaque about how they calculate these things, I just don't know. I don't know. And if I have to scroll through some guy's Twitter through 5 years of things he's tweeted, I also find that to be just kind of a pain in the ass. Like, truly, I like that Ledify has presented all of this information to me so I can make judgment calls about every single stage of how they did this. So now let's get to things I don't like about the Leetify rating. And there's a few things. The first is that they very strictly put a trade taking place within 4 seconds of the initial kill. And sometimes, by watching games and just looking at some back today, I could see that that's not always perfect. That's not always perfect, because if it's 4.05 seconds after, that's not a trade anymore. That counts as a new event in their log, which they're calculating with. So that'll change kind of the win percentages, and that'll credit people differently. And over time, those things add up. So I kind of wish there were a way that was almost more subjective. If a situation, it's kind of like if a situation happens within a certain region, I would think, and within a certain amount of time, I think that should be more credit versus, if a dude has to chase a guy for a lot, like half the map, and then it's 4.5 seconds, I think that's very different than if they kind of waited and then peaked 4.1 seconds later, because sometimes it happens. So I think that's it's a very strict number that maybe can lead to some kind of questionable outputs here and there. Another thing is that, like all complex stats, it can be gamed. And there were certain factors in this that, like basically this whole, a trade takes place within 4 seconds. Obviously, in a game of like that really matters, you would never really just say like, no, I'm going to ignore that trade, wait 4.1 seconds, then go for the kill. Like, you would never do that. But it can happen. Like that's something where it's not like every complex stat has ways where you can kind of like play to get a higher rating. And I would say when I watch certain people come up in the scene, I think certain people kind of play for their rating. Like they'll save on rounds that are like, why are you saving? Like, why would you do like that feels like a very winnable 3v3, and you're already in position. The bomb was just planted, and you're going for like hopefully a passive way of trying to get back in this round because you want to preserve rating, as opposed to really going for it. And this is like, I mean, yeah, it's something where you see people saving on round number 15, and you're just like, what are you doing? Like, you should be punished for that. That's like all complex stats though. Like if someone doesn't really go for it, but they get kills, that's HL. Ratings will always reward that, even though from the eye test we know that person just actually like sucked. Like they just hurt their team's chances of winning drastically because they never tried. That's something to take into account. I think there are certain events in the game that they haven't included yet, and I'll just read a quote from what Leetify sent me. Quote, "We have only included the economic information at the start of the round and the current number of players alive when determining the win probability throughout the round." That being said, I think the economic information should change dynamically. Like if someone picks up an op, I feel like their percentage should increase when they pick that up. But these are things that were not 100% clear to me when I read through all of the stuff. So that's something that they could make more clear publicly, hopefully. And maybe, I mean, like either way, I think that there are game events that should change win percentages, such as game time and bomb plants and, bomb timer amounts. And it's something that when you look at what they were doing on the Blast broadcast, they had a win probability thing that was provided by Skybox, and I think it used some kind of AI or I don't know, some machine learning maybe, to some kind of, to figure out what the chance of a team winning a round is. And I do kind of wish that this were a little bit more dynamic, because I think that right now it doesn't include bomb plants, which do change the win probabilities of a team, and it doesn't include time. That's something that can be talked about or discussed. I think it's just worth bringing up. How drastic the win probability should change is up for probably stats to decide, and someone with a deep knowledge of reading those stats. I don't have those stats in front of me, but I do know that when I was watching Blast, for example, when the timer is going down, the T's have a lower probability of winning. When the bomb is about to tick to zero, it's zero. You have a 0% chance of winning. So it's kind of like, should they be punished or rewarded for how they play those situations out, and how they may, so that's something that, if we're getting complex with how this whole thing is just carried out, then there is more data out there that could be put into this. Because again, this could be gamed. If you know that with lower time, your win percentage is lower, than a team like, 2017 Navi with Zeus as the IGL that always executes with 15 seconds left, is not 2017 Navi. That's Gambit. I mean, when Zeus was on Gambit, they used to do it too. They used to play the clock down pretty low a lot of the time. But either way, I think you guys know what I mean. A slower pace, slow tempo team may artificially inflate their rating. So maybe it's good, but it's something that it's worth bringing up. And then I kind of have a perplexing category, where these are things that are concerns I have with it, and things that I'm sure that they will probably touch on in the future. This will be adjusted over time, this rating. So historical data for how a player performed, let's say in 2021 when this rating's coming out, versus 2024 when the rating is a little bit more streamlined, or just the efficiency is increased, then I think that that's kind of going to make people judge things differently when they look back. But something I will always know is that a lot of ADR is good. Like 110 ADR in a game is massive, and 50 ADR is not that great. Like, that's something I will know objectively forever about Counter-Strike. Even if teams start saving every single round, the person that had higher ADR did better than the person with lower ADR, and I look at the game and I see that. Versus, like, what's problematic about this is that ADR can be always, you can look at everybody that performed in the server, and you'll see that the guy with higher ADR contributed more in terms of damage than the person that had half his ADR. And I really can safely assume that a guy with 40 ADR did not do as well as a guy with 95 ADR. Just flat out. Like, that's never going to be something up for debate. But if this rating changes, then a person who had a 53 rating, for example, 1 year, might have a 47 rating 3 years from now when they adjust the rating. And that's something that's a little bit concerning. I will say that that's something that can, over time, kind of, change our perceptions of how this goes. Another thing is that this is a quote from something they wrote to me also. For the damage dealers, we will not set a complete hard limit of 100 damage that can be attributed to a kill in particular, to partly take into account shots that would have been a one-shot kill anyways. Any damage dealt over the 100 damage kill limit will be rewarded at a 50% rate up to a total of 50 overkill damage. This basically means people with a high headshot percentage will do better. An entry fragger that does 80 damage to a player and dies will get X score, which isn't that high because they didn't get the kill. But they're going to get traded, which will boost their score by a little bit. But if the person that trades them headshots the person, then even though today on HLTV, that second person, if the entry fragger did 80, the second person would be rewarded 20 damage. In the model proposed by Ledify, they will get any damage dealt over the 100 damage kill limit will be rewarded at a 50% rate up to a total of 50 overkill damage. So to me, this sounds like they will be rewarded 50 damage for a headshot and with an AK. This is why it's the perplexing category, because that doesn't sound fair. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like you should be getting 50 ADR for a really simple trade, but you just managed to headshot him. If anything, it might be less efficient that you did that, and you might have taken more damage because you decided to take that extra 0.2 seconds to aim for the head, as opposed to doing what was correct in that situation, which was getting an arm shot and never getting shot at all. I would go with almost less of an overkill damage bonus. I would probably give it 20. I would just throw it to less. I would err to the side of lower than higher for this kind of thing. So then the last point I have is that in the meantime, to account for this is a quote. This is a quote from them, and it's about saving and how that's factored into their rating. Quote: "In the meantime, to account for saving weapons being the best option in many cases, including possibly when the bomb is defused while Ts are still alive, we will upgrade to handle rounds, which are won through other means than killing the entire enemy team by first evenly splitting the remaining round win probability to 100 or 0% for the winning losing team respectively, evenly between the remaining living players, and then at the start of the next round, the start round win probability difference caused by the save weapons is estimated based on the round losing team's economy, and 80% of that difference is transferred back, including only the players that were alive at the end of the previous round." I'm okay. To give myself some credibility, I have an Ivy League stats degree, and I've also have an Ivy League degree in philosophy. I don't know if I've ever read a sentence that was that convoluted, and I could understand what it meant. And I tried breaking it down into its components, and I think that means that, like, this was really hard for me to get through that sentence. I think that what that says to me is that people that save, their contributions will be carried over in terms of round win probability percent changes, and they won't be necessarily like hard discredited because they lost, but there is 80%, like, it's like 80%. So let's say you save. So what the way I see it is, if you save but you had 100% chance to win for some reason, like, I don't know why this would happen, but like, let's say there's 5 of you alive. There's 5 of you alive on T. There's 1 CT left, and he defuses the bomb. Let's just say for the sake of easy numbers, you guys had a 100% chance to win. You guys will actually be punished only 20% of that but you're like, what you do next round is credited more. It's like it's carried over a little bit. This is a weird speculation that I don't know why I have to speculate based off of what this is written, but this is something that was just super perplexing to me. This was a very confusing sentence, and I just wish this were a little clearer. I'll just give you guys the conclusion here, because I don't think that's a super important part of this, but I think because of how much saving happens now, I think you actually do have to take into account. And I want to talk about how they broke down ESL Pro League stats for me up to a certain date, and they said that here's how our rating changes from what we did to HLTVs. Like, here's the draft, here's the change. So we'll take a look at that. And so I'll just bring up very quickly the players that had the biggest increases and decreases from HLTV to Leetify. So the players that had the biggest shifts positively from HLTV to Leetify were kind of more late round players, from what I saw. Bubsky had actually the biggest jump for Astralis, and he jumped up 41 positions. And for a tournament that had a total of 24 teams, so 24 times 5, about 100 players jumping up, it's actually 96. For a thing with 96 players, that's substantial. That's a huge jump to jump up 41 spots. So HLTV had him pretty low as the 90th ranked player, but Ledify had him as the 51st ranked player in their rating. So And they gave Bubsky an overall 49 rating. So he was kind of like average in their eyes. And that's something where by the eye test, I kind of see it, because there were some holds he had on some CT rounds where he actually kind of bailed them out of situations that were pretty tough, but he was in them a lot. So it did feel like, you know, this is just from my observations, and I did watch nearly every Astralis map that from the first group. So that's something that kind of like, it kind of corresponds to what I was thinking. For the person that was the biggest loser, it was Yuri. The biggest losers were Yuri, Yakinder, and Poison. And I think that Yakinder is a very fair person to say that his rating is inflated by HLTV standards. He has a very sick rating, and he has a pretty good ADR in 70, but he is always a hard entry fragger, and he's always willing to die. And that basically means that by Ledify's standards, he would be engaged in a lot of those kind of early trades where he gets the first kill, but he dies too. So it ends up with a 4-on-4 situation. So the output isn't always necessarily positive for his team, because you're putting your team in a 4-on-4. That's not always a good thing, just flat out. And when you look at some of the other players, a lot of them were kind of the higher early opening kill attempt players. So Yuri, Yakinder, Poison, Stown, Nico, Boomich, Hampus, Rain, Neofrag, and Elige, actually, and Forrester. Actually, it's a lot of entry fraggers. You'll see that when you look at this, and when they release this, you'll see that entry fraggers are punished a little bit more, and people that clutch get a little bit more, or like turn the tide of rounds, get a little bit more of a boost. And that's something that when I was talking about why I think if I had to pick between Axile and Hobbit, I would have probably, like at the time, 6 months ago, gone with Hobbit over Axile. I thought he turned the tide in more rounds. I thought on T side though. So I think Axile's CT side contributions, for example, would boost him, but I think his T side, he doesn't really bail them out as much, But that was something that was very much just my observations, things I noted in my own kind of when I was watching the game. So there's other players that also got boosts, and some of them had really good flash stats. So for example, Oscar jumped up 27 ranking points, and he had one of the highest flash assist ratings of anybody at ESL Pro League. He had a 28.2% average flash assist percentage according to Leetify, and yet and he jumped up 27 spots in HLTV from HLTV to Leetify. So that's something where it gives people credit, and I think they do deserve that. So that's pretty cool, because flashing for people is just the most thankless job right now in CS as it is. So it's nice that people do get some credit for it. But those are my thoughts, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and maybe I showed you guys something more about Leetify. They're doing a lot of cool stuff. I will say, and they're not even paying me to say this, I get messages on Steam every time I finish a Faceit game where it tells me hey, don't focus on the short-term results, blah, blah, blah. And then it's a link to the game that I just played. Or GG, that was easy, or something. But it basically gives essentially HLTV quality stats to a Faceit pug I just played. And those are something I just eat that up. Because back when I used to play Dota, I used to go on Dota Buff every single time after I played, a handful of games. And I would look at okay, what hero did I play? What was my GPM like? My last hits at... I think they started doing last hits at 10 minutes now, and that's something that's pretty important. Numbers like that, I just eat it up, because I think it can help me improve better. If I see something that I did badly, which Leetify will tell me, I will look at it and I will think about it the next time. And if you're cognizant of things that you're doing wrong, you're much more likely to do better at them in the future. So thanks to Leetify for sponsoring this video and coming up with an alternative to HLTV rating. This is really kind of cool that we're getting a competitor to what has kind of been the just, I wouldn't even say gold standard. It's the only standard we've had for via HLTV for the longest time. I think the only competitor would be ESEA RWS, but no one really actually counts that as a true competitor because it has such a glaring flaw. So all in all, I'm pretty hyped about the future of this. I will be keeping tabs on the project, and maybe you guys will see more of my thoughts in the future on it. And maybe I'll cite some of these stats in desk segments that I'm on. So either way, this is just a small video that it's actually kind of was longer than I thought. This was a video for you guys that hopefully, shed some light on what Leetify is doing. And As always, guys, being toxic is a choice.